The summer of 1518 had already been cursed with famine and disease when Frau Travia first began her dance of damnation. It was July 14th, the feast day of St. Vitus, when the thin woman stumbled into the narrow streets of Strasbourg, like a marionette controlled by invisible, malevolent strings. Her movements were not those of celebration or joy, but of something far more sinister, a rhythmic, compulsive jerking that seemed to emanate from the very depths of hell itself. The cobblestones beneath her feet began to wear smooth as she spun and leaped, her eyes rolled back to show only the whites, her mouth agape in a silent scream that would haunt the dreams of those who witnessed it. What the townspeople initially dismissed as the ravings of a madwoman would soon reveal itself to be the opening note of a symphony of horror that would consume their entire city. For 6 days, Frau Travia danced without rest, her body growing gaunt and her clothes hanging in tatters. The local physicians, steeped in medieval superstition and limited knowledge, declared it a case of hot blood and prescribed more dancing as a cure. They believed that if she danced until exhaustion, the fever would break and she would be cured. How wrong they were. Instead of healing, something ancient and evil seemed to feed off her movements, growing stronger with each tortured step. Witnesses reported that her shadow moved independently of her body, sometimes dancing in different directions, and that the ground beneath her feet grew cold despite the summer heat. Children would later swear they saw dark figures dancing alongside her in their peripheral vision, figures that vanished when looked at directly. The very air around her seemed to thicken with an otherworldly presence, and dogs would howl incessantly whenever they came near the dancing woman. By the second week of July, the contagion had spread like wildfire through a drought-stricken forest. One by one, the citizens of Strasbourg found themselves drawn into the infernal dance, their bodies betraying their minds as their limbs began to move of their own accord. It started with subtle twitching, a foot tapping against their will, fingers drumming uncontrollably on tables, heads nodding to music that only they could hear. Then the full possession would take hold, and they would abandon their daily lives to join the growing throng of dancers in the streets. The market square, once the heart of commerce and community, became a writhing mass of tortured humanity. Bakers left their ovens burning, blacksmiths abandoned their forges, and mothers dropped their children's hands to succumb to the terrible rhythm that pulsed through the city. Like a malevolent heartbeat, the local authorities, desperate to contain what they still believed to be a medical condition, hired musicians and built wooden stages, thinking that organized dancing would cure the affliction more efficiently. The irony was lost on them as they fed the very demon they sought to exorcise. With each note played by the hired minstrels, the dancing became more frenzied, more violent. Dancers began to slam into walls, their bodies breaking against stone facades as they continued their macabre ballet. Blood stained the cobblestones, yet still they danced, their broken bones grinding together in sickening harmony with the music. Witnesses described how the dancers' eyes had turned completely black, as if their souls had been consumed from within. The musicians themselves began to show signs of infection, their playing becoming more erratic and discordant, as if the music was being composed by something not of this world. Father Heinrich, the city's most learned priest, had spent sleepless nights poring over forbidden texts in the cathedral's hidden archives when he discovered the horrifying truth. The dancing plague was no mere medical phenomenon. It was the resurrection of an ancient curse that had plagued the region for centuries. Deep beneath the cathedral, in chambers that predated Christianity itself, lay the remains of a pagan cult that had once worshipped through ecstatic dance until death. These cultists had believed that through endless movement, they could transcend the physical world and commune with dark entities from beyond the veil. When they were discovered and executed by early Christian authorities, their bodies had been sealed beneath the church, but their spirits had never found rest. Every generation, when conditions were right, famine, disease, desperation, the curse would manifest, seeking new vessels to continue their eternal dance. The priest's investigation revealed that Frau Trophia had not been the first victim, but rather the key that unlocked this supernatural prison. Her family line could be traced back to the original cult, and she carried within her blood the genetic memory of their blasphemous rituals. The fever that had initially consumed her was not madness, but a spiritual awakening, as the dormant cult consciousness within her DNA activated and began broadcasting its infectious rhythm to others with similar bloodlines. The dark figures that witnesses glimpsed were the spirits of the original cultists, finally free to walk among the living once more, using the bodies of their descendants as puppets in their resurrection dance. Father Heinrich realized with growing horror that the entire city of Strasbourg had been built upon a massive spiritual trap, designed to eventually harvest souls for these ancient entities. By early August, nearly 400 souls had been consumed by the dancing plague, transforming Strasbourg into a vision of the apocalypse itself. The city had become a necropolis where the living dead performed their endless macabre ballet, their feet worn to bone, their clothes long since rotted away, their bodies mere skeletal frameworks animated by malevolent spirits. The dancers had stopped eating, stopped drinking, stopped sleeping, yet somehow they continued to move, sustained by supernatural forces that fed on their suffering. The stench of decay and death permeated every corner of the city, as those who danced unto death continued their movements even in their final moments, their corpses jerking and twitching in grotesque parodies of life. The living residents who had not yet been infected barricaded themselves in their homes, but the curse seemed to seep through walls like poison gas. Children as young as 5 began to show the first signs, tiny feet tapping out rhythms that their parents recognized. With mounting terror, the city's wells had turned black, the livestock had fled or died, and the very ground beneath Strasbourg had begun to crack and split, revealing glimpses of the ancient chambers below where unholy rituals had once been performed. Strange lights emanated from these fissures, casting dancing shadows on walls that moved independently of any light source. The few remaining priests attempted exorcisms, but their holy water boiled when it touched the dancers, and their crosses melted in their hands. Even the cathedral bells had begun to ring on their own, tolling not the call to prayer but the rhythm of the damned dance, their bronze voices joining the symphony of damnation that had consumed the city. The dancing plague of Strasbourg ended as suddenly and mysteriously as it had begun, but not through any earthly intervention. On August 31st, as the summer heat reached its peak and the dancers had worn grooves into the very stone of the streets, a terrible silence fell over the city. One by one, the possessed collapsed where they stood, their supernatural animation finally exhausted. The ancient spirits, having fed for weeks on the life force of their victims, had grown strong enough to depart this realm and return to whatever hell had spawned them. The sudden absence of the demonic rhythm left an eerie quiet that was almost more terrifying than the constant sound of dancing feet had been. Survivors would later report that they could still hear the ghostly echoes of the dance in their dreams, a phantom rhythm that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The official records, sanitized by church authorities and city officials, would claim that the plague had ended through prayer and medical intervention. They would speak of mass psychogenic illness and ergot poisoning from contaminated grain, explanations that satisfied those who needed rational answers to irrational events. But Father Heinrich knew the truth, and before his mysterious death 3 months later, he sealed his findings in the deepest vaults of the cathedral with instructions that they never be opened again. The bodies of the dancers were burned in massive pyres outside the city, their ashes mixed with holy water and salt before being buried in consecrated ground. The underground chambers were filled with blessed stones and sealed with prayers in languages older than Latin. Yet even today, visitors to Strasbourg report strange sensations in the old quarter, the inexplicable urge to tap their feet, the phantom sound of medieval music drifting from empty squares, and shadows that seem to dance when no one is watching. The dancing plague of 1518 had ended, but its dark legacy would echo through the centuries, a reminder that some hungers are too ancient and terrible to ever truly die.